We're back at it again, boys. It's time to pop my radius. It's been a while since I've talked about Into the Radius, and by a while, I mean roughly by a month. But hey, to be fair, I haven't really played it in that long either. Cut me some slack, my radius, so you can only handle some. But if you're new here, hey, not Viewie. I used to stream this game almost every single day at one point until I was surrounded by enough black people until it was like I was making a home movie, if you catch my drift. That joke might be a little too edgy. So back at it again. Into the Radius is a survival horror game that involves you, the average radius inhabitant, looting and surviving in what could possibly be the worst conditions. But that hasn't stopped us before. I don't mean to brag, but if I can play Beat Saber, I can sure have enough reaction time to handle myself in the radius. What the fuck is that? Are you tired of this gross-ass, dog-ass, oil-soaked, sweat-covered default facial interface for the Quest 2? Do you wish you could have this heavenly smooth, easily cleanable, touches your skin like a million doves just graced by it facial interface? The people over at VR Cover were grateful enough to send me their fitness facial interface, which not only helps with sweating while in VR, but also is easily cleanable so you don't have this fucking wet sponge sitting on your face at all times. Check out VR Cover and their products and make sure to use my link below. Also, go check out the Discord and Patreon. I didn't want to make this part too long, so you're getting a basic advertisement for those two. Look at me, guys. Oh, I have a code now. I'm a real YouTuber. Yeah.
Get a life, kid.
It's been a while since I've truly played Into the Radius. Sure, I've logged on here and there to grab some quick footage. Wow, look at me, guys. I'm a YouTuber. I need footage for my video. I'm slowly going insane. If you guys know me or have been around long enough to watch the live streams, I used to play Into the Radius quite a bit. It's actually my second most played VR game right next to the ADHD Light Show. If you haven't already, this game is f***ing sick. Even though it's not made by some AAA studio and doesn't really have the underlying foundation of something like Alex or Bone Lab, this game is one of the highest quality VR games I've ever played. If you've ever purchased a VR headset, or really any tech product for that matter, you'll know about the honeymoon phase, where you're just stuck using that product because it's the new thing to you. You're constantly on it, using it every day, probably doing some stuff I can't say in this video, but there's nothing that this device can't do. And in VR, you're likely to have that phase with a certain game. For me, I was lost in Boneworks when I first bought an Index. Eventually, we all know where that went. But then I had almost a second phase with Into the Radius, which the honeymoon phase is almost never repeated. Back when I got into VR, I didn't really have any money for new games, but when I bought Into the Radius, dude, I was f***ing porking in VR. This is so goddamn good. The survival mechanics, story, the sights to see, all of it is, in my opinion, one of the perfect VR games. I haven't really talked about my all-time favorite VR games list, but no matter what you might think it is, Into the Radius will forever be always at the top. S tiers, S plus, SS. I'm a 45-year-old. Who knows? I don't know. That's tier list work now. But if you would consider Boneworks or something like Alex to be a truly immersive world, Into the Radius truly deserves to be right up next to them. Quest 2 or PC VR, the amount of content in this one game is easily worth the price tag, to the point of when I said I would purchase this game twice, I absolutely would have. Guess what, bozo? I forgot I bought my Quest 2 a copy as well. So I really did pay for this game twice. Do I regret that? Absolutely not. I've done 2 different runs on both PC VR and Quest 2 and enjoyed my playthroughs extensively. So when I hear we're getting Into the Radius 2, a direct sequel to the first game that's already so good, I am a little skeptical, I'm not gonna lie. While Into the Radius is a solid experience, it wasn't always that way, and it went through plenty of updates to get where it's at now. But first,
bro, when does this game get fucking good?
Now look, usually most of the time I try to be a little rambunctious with my script writing and make some stupid Fortnite jokes here and there. But this next section isn't really going to have that, because I do genuinely want to talk about the sequel without having the best Spider-Man interrupting me or something. I don't know. Like I said, Into the Radius is one of my favorite VR games right next to Alex, Boneworks, and Beat Saber, especially if you're looking into VR gaming as a long-term investment like I and many others have made already. So when I received an email from CM Games saying how Into the Radius 2 is in active development and that the first game had about 2 updates left, I am a little worried about this sequel. Don't get me wrong, I have faith in CM Games to release something amazing, but like I said before, Into the Radius isn't the same game today that it was when it was released. I mean, obviously, why wouldn't it be? There's been optimizations, content drops, new features. The whole 9 yards of game development have been brought to the table for Into the Radius. That's what makes it one of my favorite VR games. The love from the dev team hasn't gone unnoticed with me. So if I were to wish for 2 things with the sequel, my first big thing is don't release the sequel until it's fully finished and ready for release. Into the Radius came out a long time ago when VR was still getting its first big mainstream push. The Quest 2 came out only a few months before Into the Radius, so the market was extremely different than it is now. Obviously, CM Games has grown in that time as well, since Into the Radius has become more popular in recent years, but I don't want Into the Radius 2 to be an early access game, but something that feels finished from the start. Second thing, again, with the Quest 2, it changed VR forever. It's got plenty of developers interested in making VR games, it got tech giants interested in making VR headsets, but what I don't want to see happen is this game designed for Quest 2, or Quest 3, depending on what this is being developed for. Now, I get the whole developing for what's popular idea. Obviously, they're going to develop with the Quest 2/Quest 3 restraints in mind, but please do not forget about PC VR. I understand making 2 different versions of your game just to put it on the niche inside inside of a niche platform is a big ask, but PC VR will always trump standalone. Unless Mark Zuckerberg starts throwing 4090s into a headset, PC VR will always be king, and I don't want that to be forgotten. Finally, this isn't a concern, but I see a lot of people asking why a sequel is needed. But look around and into the radius. There's no microtransactions, there's no secondary purchases after you already paid for the game. You get everything under one price tag. That's CM Games' business model. They have to sell games in order to stay in business. If Into the Radius 1 slows down, it's time to move on. Plus, realistically, how far can you push one game before you add an entirely new game's amount of content into it? Ship of Theseus style. But hey, yo, you got some busted ass clothes, dog. Let me show you these slick, cool, and epic, totally not made in a sweatshop gamer clothes in my merch store. We got the doodle shirt, the graffiti hoodie, and more. Check out the link below and send me a message in the Discord if you end up buying something. Fortnite, there you go. Sorry, happy we can go back to making jokes again. In conclusion, Into the Radius will forever be on my favorite games list. I am excited to see where a sequel will go, and I will probably make a bunch of videos on that game too. Thank you to our mega rich patrons, Greg, Gain, Benjamin, Vexy, Denasi, and Only Mints. And of course, thank you to our budget-friendly patrons as well.